As we come to the end of another Pride Month in America, it's appropriate for us to consider where we stand in our culture with regard to, quote, gay pride and LGBTQ rights. Recently, at a gay pride parade in Philadelphia, there were protesters against the parade, but not protesters from the right, not conservatives who were against LGBTQ ideas. These protesters were from the far left. They were a left-wing group called Queers for Palestine. They were chanting, as the parade marched by, they were chanting, "There's no pride in genocide." In other words, they were arguing against those promoting gay pride by saying that they weren't sufficiently liberal because they didn't stand with Palestine in the current war against Israel. Now, what's interesting is in a statement on Instagram, that group, Queers for Palestine, and we'll talk about that title in just a minute, they denounced the gay pride parade in Philadelphia by saying that if you don't denounce capitalism, colonialism, and empire, then you are anti-queer. In other words, supporting LGBTQ rights, none of which are lacking in the U.S., by the way. I'm not sure why we still have Pride Month. I'm certainly not sure why we still have parades, because everything that movement set out to attain for themselves is now not only in place culturally, it's been embodied in law itself. There are no LGBTQ rights that they are still trying to get to. They have same-gender marriage. They have equality in almost everything that you can even imagine. And yet it's interesting that in the progressive left, you can never be quite progressive enough. So now, as the movement begins to cannibalize itself, it's not enough to march in a gay pride parade, but those who are marching in the parade are being criticized because they are not sufficiently against colonialism and against genocide, as though there's anything related to those issues. The progressive left is perpetually outraged. And no matter what they are given, no matter what they attain, no matter what they legally are able to accomplish, they have a moving goalpost. There's always something else that has to be denounced, that has to be marched against, that has to be screamed about because they're outraged. Why is that the case? It's interesting because the reality is progressiveness, wokeness, if you will, is from a theological and cultural standpoint, wokeness is a religion based on works. In other words, you are always atoning for your own shortcomings by showing how committed you are to some new oppressed group that you can take offense on behalf of and somehow defend against the larger culture of oppressors. Now, the question in my mind is, at this point, who are the oppressed and who are the oppressors? Because we're often told that Christians and conservatives in general are holding down these poor people who just want to be themselves. And yet the reality is, it seems like the hatred, the cancel culture, the violent threats, they seem to be all coming in one direction. For example, at a New York City Pride parade during the month of June, there was a man speaking about the situation in Palestine who boldly held up a sign that read, "Kill the hostages now." Earlier this year, a woman told the Bakersfield City Council, "We'll see you at your house and we'll murder you there." College students proudly are declaring across our country that the attack on Israel by Hamas on October the 7th of last year was the right thing to do. And they often quote this line from the river to the sea, knowing that what they are promoting is the genocide of an entire nation of people called Israel. Pro-Palestinian protesters even walked out on Jewish actor Jerry Seinfeld as he gave the commencement speech this spring at Harvard University, simply because he had signed an open letter denouncing Hamas's attack on innocent civilians. Well, we'll meet you at your house and we'll murder you there. Kill the hostages. Destroy the nation of Israel. Genocide. Who are the oppressed and who are the oppressors? On October the 7th of last year, Hamas slaughtered parents in front of their children. They raped and tortured women. They decapitated and pulled lifeless Israeli bodies through the streets to the cheers of people. If we circle back around to where I started today, if members of a group called Queers for Palestine, if they had actually been on the ground in Israel on October the 7th, they would now be dead, or worse, just for being gay. If Hamas knew of this group, they would execute the lot of them without a second thought. And yet, in this bizarre world of nonsense that we now live in, we have Queers for Palestine. Clearly, they would be executed if they were in Palestine. But Queers for Palestine screaming at LGBTQ parade goers because they're somehow not on board with the most extreme positions of the left. It's interesting when you actually look at the situation on the ground in Israel. Arab Israeli citizens have had the right to vote in Israel since 1949. There are Arabs in that country that sit on their Supreme Court. There are over 130,000 Palestinians who worked in the country until the war began. Apartheid and genocide are not words that describe Israel. They are words, however, that describe those who live by standing on the necks of simple Palestinian citizens. Being part of the Free Palestine movement offers yet another identity for these ideologues. People that have achieved LGBTQ rights almost to the point of being unopposed to anything that they want, have lost faith in God, so that now, as a works religion, they have to place their energy into false political and identity movements. In other words, every new group that I can be offended on behalf of is one more mark in my favor that I have sacrificed to the gods of political justice. The progressive message is that you can't support LGBTQ rights any longer if you don't also hate capitalism, fight the patriarchy, and support Palestine. Being pro-LGBTQ is no longer enough in America. You would think that reaching the pinnacle of secular acceptance and that would be grounds to end their marches, their Pride Month. They should have celebrated that they got what they wanted. And yet now they are perpetually looking for something new. That's why what started as homosexual and lesbian interest in full standing in society for marital rights and other things has now been expanded to an alphabet that no longer has meaning for most people because there are so many categories under this umbrella that it no longer makes any sense. Transgender activism has surged. It overlaps with social justice causes. And now Pride Month has become this menu of everything that the progressive left dreams about, including things that they haven't even thought of that will be required in next year's Pride Month. Why? What's underlying all of this? Well, the easy answer is, once you've rejected God, you replace atonement, you replace that sense that I have something in me that needs to be fixed. You replace atonement by forgiveness in Jesus Christ. You replace it with works that say, I have to be on the cutting edge of justice and I have to fight for every identity group out there because that's how I receive value. That's how I have a sense that I'm a good person. Well, there's something else going on besides that. Part of this underlying worldview that factors into all of the left's agenda, I think, is an attack not only on the family, but on the very concept of children. There's a reason why the transgender movement is so aggressive about wanting to present themselves in children's libraries with drag queen story hours. There's a reason why the LGBTQ community, which by definition is a community that doesn't have to deal with the struggles of pregnancy, and yet they are virtually 100% behind full abortion rights. How do those issues fit together? It can only be explained if underlying all of it is essentially an attack on the very idea of children. Now that's fascinating because when you look in the ancient world, the ancient Eastern world worshiped what we call fertility gods. That is, they had, by different names, gods like Baal and Asherah, Dionysus and Aphrodite. In the ancient world, having children was universally understood as a blessing, so much so that nearly every ancient civilization had religious cults devoted to inducing fertility so that they could multiply the number of children that they had in their tribe. They understood what we seem to have lost sight of, and that is, unless every woman had at least 2 children, on average, civilizations shrivel. Shrinking agriculture, shrinking commerce, shrinking military. In other words, if you don't have enough babies, you have civilizational death. Well, the ancient world, for all of their paganism, for all of the fact that they turned away from the one true God in order to live by human-oriented belief systems, they understood that children were still essentially a good thing, and they wanted more of them. If the ancient world was marked by fertility cults, the modern West worships infertility gods. It's fascinating, really. We have lost the understanding that when you have no children, it means you have no future. But today's progressives promote intentional childlessness as the optimal lifestyle choice and the only vibrant path to self-actualization. We have pro-abortion groups entitled things like Shout Your Abortion. We have celebrities who promote World Contraception Day. Our culture has been infiltrated by infertility cults. The very idea that children are a problem, a bane on our existence. And we have tried diligently over the last several generations to get women to believe that raising children is a sacrifice of their full life. I read of a conversation recently of a woman who stayed at home and raised her children. And a progressive made the comment to her, he said, instead of being a mother, you could have gone out and you could have been a scientist. You could have been a doctor. She said, I know that, but I stayed at home and I have raised 5 scientists and doctors. What a great answer. You want to multiply your influence generationally? Raising and producing productive children who live by truth, who make real contributions to the culture, far exceeds sitting in a cubicle somewhere churning out paperwork for a faceless corporation. Right at the time when many people are waking up to the devastating effects globally of cratering birth rates, a trend directly tied to the progressive war against the traditional family, a war that includes the militancy of sterile LGBTQ ideology, That fertility is being coronated as the gods that we really need to worship. What's the biblical response? Well, first of all, in Genesis 1:28, it says that God made us male and female, and that we were charged to be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. In Psalm 127, verses 3 and 4, the Bible says this, "Behold, children are a gift of the Lord. The fruit of the womb is a reward. Like arrows in the hand of a warrior, so are the children of one's youth." Verse 5, "How blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be ashamed when they speak with their enemies in the gate." What's behind this progressive advance into perpetual hostility and outrage, always looking for some new cause to celebrate? Well, they've rejected God. Romans 1 tells us that God gives them over to nonsensical thinking. In rejecting God, they now atone for their own sins by telling themselves that they're good people because they defend the helpless around the world, wherever they can be found. But underneath even that, there is a demonic motivation against the most basic structure of society established by God. One man marries one woman, and they have babies that grow up to set human civilization in a better direction. Why would we be against babies? For the same reason we're for all of these other things, abortion, LGBTQ rights, whatever. It's because there is underlying all of it a spiritual attack on the blueprint that God has established for humans to thrive. As biblical followers of Jesus, we must hold the line of what is true. Do not be bullied. Do not be debated into silence. Do not be canceled. We stand for what is right, what is good, what is helpful, and most of all, for what is true. This is Truth Currents.